So it is November, and that is bizarre. Let's talk about what I read, and just for fun, also what I watched movie-wise. I want to talk about movies more. They make me happy. Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. If you're new, welcome back. If you are returning, my name is Maya, and as I mentioned, today will be my reading slash movie watching slash TV watching wrap up. That's the word I was looking for. Alrighty, in the month of October 2020, I read about 9 books. I am recording this a little early, so by the time this video goes up, I might have finished an additional 1 or 2, but let's go with 9 for now. And this is fun. I didn't know you could do this. I've also read 1,952 pages, which is kind of cool. It seems like a little bit of a lot. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Let's talk about the books I finished, because they were a lot of fun. The first book I finished this month was on October 5th, and it was Well-Read Black Girl. Well-Read Black Girl is an anthology. It was written by Gloria Edom, and it is really a compilation of stories from a variety of Black writers, particularly female Black writers, in the United States and all around the world. The book talks about their individual stories and anecdotes with representation in books, and it just convinced me even further than I've already been convinced that representation in any media, but particularly literature, is integral to developing not only our senses of selves, but also our empathy. This is a book I'd honestly recommend to anyone. I found it highly inspiring. Each author had an amazing story to tell, and I learned a lot from it. Next, I finished And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. This is a novella, and it's about a grandfather who is nearing death. He's nearing the end of his life and his relationship with both his son and his grandson. It's both an ode to family and past beautiful and not so beautiful experiences, and a reckoning with mortality. And I think mortality is something that's really important to talk about. I realize I'm only 17. I realize I hopefully have a long life in front of me, but I think that death is something that we should talk about more. This is a point the book made that I actually found really interesting. People are more afraid of growing old than they are of death. And I think that's such an important topic, because why are we afraid of growing old? I mean, we're afraid because we'll get ill or we'll be more feeble and we won't be able to do the things we love, but we shouldn't let that kind of inevitable mortality define the way that we live our lives. This was a book that made me cry. I was actually on the way to my grandma's house when I was listening to it on audiobook. It's pretty short, so that made me cry even more. But I would recommend it. Frederick Bachman has such a way with words. Even when his novels are translated, they're just so touching and beautiful, and I love them to death. If you have like 3 to 4 hours to do nothing, yeah, you should sit down, listen to this one, and really reflect on both your own life and the people within your life, and how beautiful and important you are, and how beautiful and important they are. Next, I read Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. It was really cute. It was really nostalgic. Peter Pan the film is one of my favorite Disney movies and was growing up. I did take a star off of this book because there's really inaccurate and outdated cultural representation that wasn't okay then and isn't okay now. I firmly believe that you can still enjoy problematic books so long as you point out what's wrong with them, why it's incorrect, and what we can do better in the future. This is something I think Disney is still having a problem with in terms of representation of different cultures and peoples. Just look at Mulan 2020. They tried so hard to make it authentically Chinese that they made it not Chinese. The phoenix is Egyptian. I paid $30 for that, and I'm kind of pissed. But yeah, Peter Pan, really poor representation, very nostalgic, sweet story that I think is just kind of fantastical and whimsical in every way. But again, no problem taking off that star, because you gotta acknowledge the faults and the things that you love. Next, I read Columbine by Dave Cullen. I will have a book review for this coming out in the very near future. Columbine by Dave Cullen is a nonfiction account by a journalist of the Columbine massacre in Colorado in 1999. And this book is incredibly impactful and empathetic. It's written from a very journalistic viewpoint because, as I mentioned, the author is a journalist, and that was something that I felt added to it so much. It made it so much more rich and in-depth. It's an account of not only what happened that day, April 20th, 1999, but also the psyches of Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, who were the perpetrators of the massacre. It talks about the aftermath of the massacre, PTSD, student students who were injured and had to recover, how people cope with loss. And really my favorite part, I would have to say, is this book doesn't give us anyone to blame. And we were talking about this in my English class, and my English teacher mentioned that she would blame the parents, and that's totally valid. I think in stuff like this, people will have opinions, it's inevitable, and they should be able to express them as they see fit, as long as it's in a kind way. But in my opinion, no one individual is to blame. In Columbine, it was a failure of a system, and systems, including the mental health support system, not only in our schools, but in the United States, the school system, the police system, etc. At the end of the day, it was a really impactful book, probably one of my favorite books I've ever read for school, and definitely one of the best nonfiction pieces I've been exposed to lately. Next, I read The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, and oh my goodness, I loved it. Neil Gaiman's writing is really fantastic. He's one of my favorite authors, but every time I read his work, I feel like I'm missing something, and I don't know why. Maybe it's the pacing. Sometimes I feel that his pacing is a little off, but in general, his storytelling capabilities and his imagination are phenomenal. The Ocean at the End of the Lane tells the story of this man who's returning to kind of his hometown for a funeral, and along the way, he drives past his old house and his neighbor's old house, and he decides to park, and he goes to his neighbor's old house and sits by a pond that he was told when he was a child was an ocean. The girl who had lived there called it her ocean, and just in general, she and her family, specifically her mother and grandmother, had a big impact on this man's life. He recounts his adventures with this girl. There's fantasy in there. The characters are just so complex and nuanced and wonderful, and it was just fantastic. It was just a fun book. It didn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time it did explore some pretty serious topics. The characters, as I mentioned, were really fantastic and fleshed out. They weren't just side characters or window characters, which I loved. And yeah, I'd recommend this for you if you're looking for kind of a fun read that has an element of maybe a bit of horror, a bit of spooky stuff, and fantasy. Next, I read The Complete Tales of Peter Rabbit and Friends by Beatrix Potter. Not what I expected, I will say that. The ending to a lot of these short stories were kind of like Brothers Grimmish in their style. I thought it was going to be more Winnie the Pooh, but it was really cute. It's just tales of bunnies and squirrels and mice that just exist in their own little universe and have their own little lives. My favorite thing probably was she described rabbit tobacco, and rabbit tobacco was lavender, and I thought that was so cute. It's just so clear to me that this woman had a really complex imagination and loved to tell stories. And that's what makes books good, in my opinion, is when you can really tell that someone wanted to tell this story, that they had a reason for this. It had a very cottagecore vibe, so if you're feeling cottagecore-y, cottagecore-esque, I'd recommend this book. It's sweet. It's sweet. It's one that if I have kids, I'll probably read them these stories. Oh, I loved this one. Next, I read Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I'm actually in the middle of another Maureen Johnson book. It is a collaboration with Lauren Miracle, maybe, and John Green, which is Let It Snow. It's okay. There's a lot of cheerleader hating. What is up with the cheerleader hating? But anyway, I loved Truly Devious. It's super Agatha Christie-esque, which I love. It follows our main character, Stevie Bell, who comes from a pretty conservative family, but winds up going to this really cool, really innovative school in Vermont. And it's a pretty liberal place. Her parents are hesitant to leave her there, but she convinces them that this is the path she needs to take. Why is Stevie so intent on going to this school? Well, because she wants to solve a murderers, plural, that occurred there multiple years ago. And by multiple, I mean about 100. Stevie is a true crime fanatic. She loves to read. She has panic attacks and anxiety. She reminded me a lot of myself. I will say, I hate cliffhangers. I absolutely loathe them, especially when a book will end with "to be continued." I just want to tear my hair out because I invested so much time in this book and there's no resolution. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to reading the second book. I have it on hold at the library right now, and it's cute. There is a bit of a teenage romance in it if you're looking for that. It's there. And yeah, I really did enjoy this book. Second to last book for you today is March Book 1 by John Lewis. So John Lewis was the incredible civil rights activist that passed away earlier this year, and he was a senator in the United States Congress. He was a huge part of the nonviolence movement. He was one of the Big Six, the Super Six, that spoke at the March on Washington, where Dr. King delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech. He was also a big part of the sit-in movement at lunch counters that would only serve white guests. This novel was actually a graphic novel. I don't read a lot of those, so it was a really good change in pace for me. And I decided I love graphic novels because they play out a lot like movies, which I love. I love movies. Oh my God. I can picture each scene. There's such a cinematic flow. This book was really accessible in nature. Obviously, it talks about some really complex things that are really, really extra applicable to today, but it did so in a way that I think a young child to an old adult could understand and appreciate. The artwork in this book was amazing, as were John Lewis's anecdotes and stories. His childhood was fascinating, and he talks a lot about how much he loved chickens when he was little because he grew up on a farm because his father was a sharecropper. So he talks a lot about his chickens and the Bible services he would hold with his chickens, which was really cute. I would absolutely recommend this book. I do hope to continue with, it's kind of a series. I think it's either 2 or 3 parts of these books called March, and I definitely want to continue on with them. The last book that I finished this month was Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. Very fitting. Halloween, just happened. I know it's hard to remember because everything is blurring together because every day looks the same. Halloween Party. We are in England, in a suburb, in a pretty rich woman's house, right? And there is a murder at the Halloween party. So who is called in but our favorite detective, Hercule Poirot. Hercule Poirot investigates the murder. He talks to a lot of really interesting witnesses, and there are a lot of different suspects. A lot of different things could have happened. Almost every single Agatha Christie book up to this point that I've read, I have predicted the ending of. I really love murder mysteries. I think true crime is incredibly fascinating. I have a weird relationship with true crime. I don't like deriving entertainment out of real people's misfortunes, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I find it really compelling. Anyway, that is to say that I really enjoy mystery and consume a lot of media surrounding it. So I've been able to predict the endings of things like Murder on the Orient Express, and then There Were None, A Caribbean Mystery, etc. But I didn't get this one. I did not get this one until the last minute, which was so much fun. And I think mystery is even more enjoyable when you don't know what's coming. So that was a good time. Those are all the books I read this month. Let's talk about what I'm reading right now, and then we'll move into the movies. Right now, I am reading the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. It is hilarious right now. It's kind of a comedy, but I know it's going to move into horror really, really soon. I'm also reading, and I mentioned this in a recent video, Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. This is due super soon to my school library, so I gotta finish it up fast. And this is one I'm honestly not very far into, but really want to be, and that is the first book in the Wheel of Time series, which we also talked about in that last video. In terms of audiobooks, I'm still slowly making my way through A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. I am loving it, but it's definitely the least interesting out of the series that I've read so far. I'm also listening to Felix Ever After, which I am loving. Let It Snow by Maureen Johnson, Lauren Miracle, and John Green, as I mentioned. And I'm still working on Cider House Rules by John Irving. All are very promising thus far. With that, let's get into the movies. The first movie I watched was a comedy, and it was the compilation of all of the vice presidential and presidential debates. That was a joke. Please go vote. Please, please, please. The real first movie I watched this month was The Grand Budapest Hotel with my dad, and that was a lot of fun. I love film. I honestly haven't seen nearly as much as I ought to have, so I'm slowly making my way through my family's collection, and this is one of my parents' favorite movies. It's Wes Anderson, my first exposure to Wes Anderson, but I really, really enjoyed it. I love the symmetry and the color and the vibrancy he uses in his films. His comedy is just so well timed, and it was just a fun story. I wanted it to be a book because it starts with talk about a book at the beginning. Oh, also really quick, I thought this was so cool. I put this in my bullet journal. It says, "Women filmmakers captured the fear of 2020. And I thought that was just brilliant because, yeah. Next, I watched Enola Holmes on Netflix. It was super cute. It's about Sherlock Holmes' younger sister, Enola, who doesn't exist within the canon series by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, but does exist in a different book series that I think is called Enola Holmes very aptly. It was really cute. It was a fun story, definitely more YA mystery geared, but it was fun. I really do enjoy Millie Bobby Brown as an actress. I think she's quite talented and told the story in a really great way. There are a lot of fourth wall breaks in this film, some of which work really well, others of which, like, why were they there?
Do you have any ideas?
But on the whole, this was really fun. I loved the costumes. This is how I want to dress every single day of my life. And I'd recommend you watch it specifically if you're looking for an autumnal movie. And then I went down the Noah Baumbach rabbit hole and watched The Squid and The Whale, as well as the Meyerowitz stories on Netflix, both of which deal with parenting and divorce. Kind of Baumbach's theme. It's his thing, if you will, but he explores it in different ways in every film of his that I've seen, which I appreciate a lot. Both are really beautiful stories, both have the dialogue that Noah Baumbach just is so good at, that's so realistic, and I would recommend that you read it. Not read it, sorry, watch it. I'm so used to talking about books here. So today is October 30th when I'm filming this, and the last film I will be watching this month will probably be either Frances Ha or Moonlight. Frances Ha is also a Noah Baumbach film. Moonlight is directed by Barry Jenkins. Frances Ha is about like this unconventional woman in New York City. I think she wants to be a dancer, and Greta Gerwig plays the main character, which I love. Moonlight is a coming-of-age story about a young black man who is growing up in Miami and the community that supports him with just kindness and love as he continues to grow. I think it's semi-autobiographical as well, and I've heard that I believe the actress's name is Naomi Scott, although no it's not. That's the girl from Aladdin. Naomi Harris. I've heard that her just acting in that film is phenomenal. It also won Best Picture, so obviously it's going to be amazing. But yeah, those are all the books and movies that I read and watched in the month of October, and the ones I'm currently working on at the moment. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear what you guys have been consuming media-wise lately, and I will see you all next time.